When the first snowfall of the season blanketed the small town of Pinecrest, the locals knew that winter had truly arrived. For 57-year-old Samuel Whitaker, the snow brought both beauty and isolation to his humble cabin, nestled on the edge of the vast wilderness. The once skilled hunter had almost retired his rifle, following a series of health scares that left him with a persistent cough and a weakened heart. Samuel's imposing figure had withered over time, and his unruly beard had turned to a salt and pepper hue. In the hope of restoring his health, Samuel had moved from the smog-choked city to Pinecrest. He found solace in the fresh air as well as the abundant wildlife that roamed the surrounding woods. With each passing day, Samuel grew more enamored with his newfound home, adopting a simple lifestyle that he believed would heal his body and soul. As winter deepened, Samuel spent his days chopping firewood, tending to his small garden, and ice fishing on the frozen lake. He had become self-sufficient, rarely venturing into town for supplies. The town's residents, while intrigued by the mysterious newcomer, gave him the space and privacy he sought. One fateful day, as Samuel trekked through the snow-laden forest, the air crisp and the trees laden with a fresh layer of snow, he suddenly heard a faint cry. It echoed through the frosty air, setting his instincts on edge. Samuel's senses heightened, his focus sharpening like that of a seasoned hunter who had spent countless hours in the wilderness. His eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for the source of the distressing sound. With each step, he moved closer to the source, his keen ears zeroing in on the location. Gun in hand, Samuel prepared himself for whatever he might find. When Samuel finally discovered the source of the cries, he was surprised to find a fox caught in a trap, as opposed to the more dangerous predator he had initially anticipated. The creature's desperate and pain-filled whimpers tugged at his heartstrings, making him acutely aware of the animal's suffering. As Samuel raised his gun, pointing it at the fox, he couldn't help but comment on the pitiful sight before him. "You poor thing," he muttered, his voice filled with a mix of sorrow and uncertainty. "You sound so desperate and in pain." Samuel hesitated, torn between putting the fox out of its misery or sparing its life. The creature was badly injured, and he knew that releasing it might only prolong its suffering. As he stood there, contemplating his decision, he couldn't help but reflect on his own age and the time he had spent in Pinecrest. The peaceful and serene environment had changed him, softening the hardened edges that had been forged by a lifetime of hunting. The fox, now free from the cruel jaws of the trap, attempted to limp away. Its strength, however, quickly waned, and it collapsed from exhaustion just a few feet from Samuel. For a moment, Samuel considered leaving the fox to its fate, believing that he had already done his part by setting it free. But as he turned to walk home, something inside him urged him to reconsider. He couldn't just leave the injured creature to suffer alone in the cold forest. Samuel turned back and carefully scooped the fox into his arms. Its small body trembled with pain, but it seemed to understand that Samuel meant it no harm. The journey back to his cabin was slow and deliberate, as Samuel took care not to jostle the injured fox any more than necessary. Upon reaching his home, Samuel knew that he had made the right choice. As the days turned to weeks, Samuel cared for the fox, giving it the name Ember. She grew stronger and more confident, her playful spirit quickly endearing her to Samuel. The duo spent their days exploring the woods, with Ember darting through the trees, her natural curiosity leading the way. As Ember gradually healed from the wounds inflicted by the trap, it seemed that Samuel, too, was experiencing a transformation. His health improved, the fresh air and gentle pace of life in Pinecrest working their restorative magic. The companionship of the fox and the daily care he provided for her seemed to breathe new life into Samuel, filling him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Days turned into weeks, and soon Ember had made a full recovery. As much as Samuel had grown to love the fox, he knew that she belonged in the wild, free to roam the forest and live her life as nature intended. With a heavy heart, he decided that it was time to release Ember back into the wild, knowing that their time together had been a gift for both of them. On the day of Ember's release, Samuel carried her to the edge of the forest, his heart aching at the thought of saying goodbye. As he set her down on the soft forest floor, he whispered words of encouragement and love, hoping that she would remember him fondly and find happiness in her natural habitat. Ember hesitated for a moment, looking back at Samuel with her amber eyes filled with gratitude. Then, with a swish of her bushy tail, she bounded into the underbrush. disappearing into the woods that she called home. Samuel stood there, watching her go, tears streaming down his face. He knew that letting her go was the right thing to do, and he was grateful for the time they had shared and the lessons they had learned from one another. Time passed, and Samuel continued to live his quiet life in Pinecrest. The memories of his time with Ember remained close to his heart, but he could not shake the lingering loneliness that had returned since her departure. He continued his daily routines, still occasionally venturing into the forest, always hoping to catch a glimpse of Ember in her natural habitat. One fateful evening, as Samuel sat by the fire, a loud crash echoed through his home. A group of bandits had broken into his house, seeking to plunder his belongings and cause destruction. Samuel, though caught off guard, immediately sprang into action, utilizing the skills he had honed during his years as a hunter. With the grace and precision of a seasoned warrior, Samuel grabbed his trusty axe from near the fireplace. He spun around, extending the axe in a wide arc, which effectively knocked the knife out of the first bandit's hand. The bandit's eyes widened in shock as the weapon clattered to the floor, rendering him momentarily defenseless. Samuel didn't waste any time, quickly moving on to the next assailant. He deftly grabbed an arrow from his quiver. In one fluid motion, he jammed the arrow into the bandit's foot, pinning his foot to the ground. The bandit let out a howl of pain, struggling to free himself, but finding it impossible to do so. The remaining bandits hesitated, momentarily stunned by the impressive display of skill from the old hunter. He fought the bandits fiercely, using every ounce of strength and cunning he possessed. But as the adrenaline coursed through his veins, his age and heart condition began to take their toll. The tide of the battle turned, and the bandits gained the upper hand, grinning maliciously as they saw Samuel falter. The bandits managed to overpower him, one of them pulling out a length of rope and roughly tying his hands behind his back. As Samuel struggled to catch his breath, the bandit leader sneered at him. "You know, old man, if you were younger, you would have made a great bandit." The bandits started roughing up Samuel, hitting and kicking him as they laughed cruelly. But their twisted amusement was suddenly cut short when they heard a chilling shriek from outside the house. The bandits froze in fear, the sound unnerving even the most hardened among them. They exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of who or what could be making such a terrifying sound. Samuel, bruised and battered, managed to lift his head, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes. He couldn't be sure, but that eerie cry sounded eerily familiar to him. The bandits continued to stand in terrified silence, their attention now focused on the mysterious source of the scream that echoed through the night. With a sudden crash, Ember burst through the window, her amber eyes shining fiercely in the darkness. The bandits couldn't tell what creature she was in the dim light, but her swift, lethal movements led them to believe they were facing a wolf or some other monstrous beast. Ember wasted no time going for the throats of the bandits one by one. Her agility and speed were unparalleled, and the intruders quickly found themselves overwhelmed. In their panic, they started to attack each other, unable to see clearly in the dark and unsure of where the relentless attacker would strike next. Samuel watched in awe as Ember expertly took down the bandits. The fox moved like a shadow in the darkness, her every action precise and deadly. It was clear that she had come to repay the debt she owed Samuel, and she would not rest until each of the bandits was defeated. The bandits continued to struggle, their fear mounting as they realized they were being hunted by an unseen predator. Their ranks quickly thinned, with some being taken down by Ember's vicious attacks and others accidentally injuring their own comrades. The once confident group of criminals was now reduced to a terrified, disorganized mess, at the mercy of the fox who had come to protect her friend. During the chaos, one of the bandits managed to land a lucky strike, his axe grazing Ember's side as she darted past. The pain was sharp and immediate, but Ember refused to let it slow her down. After the fight was over, Samuel mustered the strength to free himself from his bonds. Ember, her energy spent and her body trembling with exhaustion, slowly limped towards Samuel. Her breaths were shallow and ragged, the wound from the axe leaving a trail of crimson in the snow. Samuel's heart clenched at the sight of his injured friend, and he immediately rushed to her side, offering his support. With her last ounce of strength, Ember managed to reach Samuel before her legs gave out and she collapsed onto the snow-covered ground. Though her eyes were clouded with pain, they still held a fierce determination and loyalty that Samuel knew all too well. She had come to repay her debt, and in her heart, she knew she had succeeded. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up to share the message, and don't forget to check out the recommended video on your screen. It's sure to leave you feeling inspired. We'll be back soon with more uplifting content, so stay tuned and have a wonderful day.